I'd like the record to reflect that I was here at 5:30, albeit at a very low chair, and that other people were chatting away until our usual late start time of 8 minutes after, very low. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So this being our first official meeting of 2019, I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. That's our first item on our agenda, and our second item is to reach the request for budget adjustments. We have two routine items which are detailed on the meeting agenda. Ms. Cromick, BET Clerk, can you please move these items?
I'd like to move number ED9, the Board of Education, $536,000 for an additional appropriation for the Greenwich High School water damage. And HD4, the Health Department, $15,248, approval to use the HER grant.
Okay. Is there a second for those items? Moved by Ms. Cromick, seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Ms. Moriarty, can you please give the Budget Committee report?
Yes, this item was presented to the BET Budget Committee by Mr. Mayo, interim superintendent of the schools. The request is for an appropriation, as you heard, for $536,000. The cost is to cover the cost to repair the damage from a leak in the Performing Arts Center Galleria. The damage occurred when a flexible connection in the piping for the heating system failed in the ceiling of the Galleria. This failure released a significant amount of very hot water into the area, causing damage to the drywall, the electrical outlets, some of the lights, as well as running down the Galleria and entering areas to the south in the gym and to the north, which was the auditorium lobby and at the very entrance of the actual auditorium. The request for the interim is to allow the Board of Education to begin their repairs immediately. These funds would come from the capital and non-recurring fund. The town's insurance coverage is expected to cover the cost after a $25,000 deductible. These are covering eligible costs. The insurance proceeds would go into the capital and non-recurring fund when they are received. The vote of the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
And is there a report on H?
Yes, there is. So we got item HD4 from the Health Department, which was approval to use the HERR grant of $15,248. The HERR grant, which is the Health Education Risk Reduction Grant. This is an extension to a previous 3-year contract. The funds will support the Health Department's efforts to obtain a national public health accreditation. They want to use the funds to hire a consultant to assist them with the application. The vote at the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Is there any discussion on either of these two items? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to take a voice and hand vote on ED9 and HD4. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those items have carried 12-0-0. Mr. Bernstein and Mr. Mayo, thank you both for being here this evening. Okay. Still?
Jill, do you want to send Tom Bird an email and Alexis?
About the votes?
About that formal vote?
Sure.
Because they have to report that tonight.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Okay, we also have two requests for budget adjustments that I have designated as non-routine. Mike, before you want to maybe wait. The first item is PD4 for the police. Is there a motion for this item? A motion by Ms. Tarkington. As second? seconded by Mr. Weisbrod. Okay. Ms. Moriarty, please give the Budget Committee report.
So this request was from the Police Department, approval to use funds of $358,255 for the purchase of software and hardware to overlay an electronic fire and EMS dispatch protocol system onto the existing dispatch system. These funds will come from Greenwich's allocation of the state's 911 surcharge revenue, which is required by the town to be used to support the town's 911 system. Those funds are received by the town quarterly and accumulate in a restricted reserve fund. This system, the improvements to the system will allow the 911 operator to provide quicker assistance to the caller and will enable the dispatcher to provide more complete information to the EMS or fire responders. The vote was 4-0-0 to recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moriarty. So are there any, Mr. Mason, comments on PD4?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for putting this as non-routine. This item, I think, is very important publicly. We write guidelines every year. We talk about finding efficiencies. We talk about increasing levels of service to the community and doing it financially in a proper way. As I understand this, GEMS found a software program that enhances their response to an emergency call, which has an added series of questions that the fire department uses and law enforcement. It's being funded through a grant. It may have some operational costs, but going forward. But when we see three departments get together to work on something like this, where there's no increased cost to the taxpayers, and there's certainly a benefit, I just think that needs to be highlighted. And I commend the three departments on it, and I'm really glad that they went and did this. This is what we encourage departments to do in our guidelines and our budget deliberations. So I'm very happy that, and I hope we all vote on it again, but I'm very happy to see this before us tonight, and I supported it in Budget Committee along with my colleagues, and I'm just glad this item is here before us tonight.
Okay, are there further comments on this item? Okay. Mr. Mason, thank you for highlighting it and highlighting the cooperation of the public safety departments. All in favor, motion PD4 moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Weisbrod. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The next non-routine item, NW2 for Nathaniel Witherell, a release of conditions on gym expansion. Can I have a motion? That item has been moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded? Seconded by Ms. Crumick. Okay. Ms. Moriarty, can you please give the Budget Committee report?
Yes, this project came to the BET in last year's budget approval. The project was for the rehabilitation gym to expand that and improve the facility. The estimated cost at that time was for $272,000 to be funded with the $182,000 STEEP grant, which the Nathaniel Witherell had applied and got permission to receive, plus up to $90,000 contribution from the Friends of Nathaniel Witherell. The project recently went out to bid, and the lowest qualifying bids came in for a total of $192.7 thousand. If you add a 10% contingency to those bids, the project is expected to come in around $212,000. Given the revised numbers, with the STEEP grant still being at $182,000, that means that the contribution from the Friends to make up the difference is $30,000. So that's how we get to the request before us tonight for $30,000 release of conditions. The condition was written that the requirement was just confirmation of receipt of the Friends funds by the town, and that has been confirmed by the controller with the document that we had in our packet and also with an email from the controller. So if some questions came up at our meeting that if the project were to exceed the $212,000, which this release of conditions would cover, how would the project be funded? And we were told that the Friends would be able to cover the additional cost for the project above that, but they would need to come back to the BET for a release of conditions for additional funds. That's not expected to be the case, however. So the vote at the Budget Committee was 4-0-0 to recommend release of the funds.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, this item has been moved by Ms. Tarkented, seconded by Ms. Crumick. It's the release of condition for Nathaniel Witherall. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. Okay. The next item on our agenda this evening is the assessor's report. The assessor is out today, not feeling well, and so we don't have a representative from that office. If there are questions on the report, can you please email them to our assessor, and I'm sure she will respond as soon as she's back in the office feeling better. Ms. Tarkington. Leslie, thank you. Ms. Tarkington, thank you for pointing that out. I want to ask the BT, does anyone have a question that would prevent them from accepting the report at this meeting? Seeing no indication, can I have a motion to accept the assessor's report? Oh, so we have a motion made by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Raymer. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The next item on our agenda this evening is the Comptroller's Report. Mr. Minarski, please join us.
Good evening, Madam Chair and BET members. Let me get this in the way. You have a copy of the Comptroller's Report. Up quickly, I have one update, but the opening item, we had another very good year with low rates on the bonding and the short-term borrowing. And we reaffirmed our AAAs with S&P and Moody's. One update to this area, and I'll open up to questions. The IBIC, the Independent Bond and Investment Consultants, sold their business, and they were going into the fifth year of their contract. They will be closing their doors February 8th, and I will have to go out for request for proposal. That's the bad news. The good news is that potentially they could resurface under, I don't know the name of the firm, it's a national firm out of Dallas that I've never heard of, but they could potentially resurface as the financial advisors next year. The way the RFP works and the contract works with the financial advisor is they basically do the bulk of their work starting in November when they call me, and together Bill Lindsay and I work on the official statement, and then we get together and we pull the bond counsel, Robinson Cole, in to review our work, and then we go through the credit rating reviews, and then we end up going to market. We do not need the services of the financial advisors normally through February through, say, November. However, every 2 years, we go out and we do the debt and the fund balance policies, and we sometimes need the services of Mr. Lindsay. The last year was unusual because we had a new group of folks that come in They're known as RTM members, and they got involved pretty heavily. And they went through the learning curve, and Bill Lindsay helped out. I know Leslie Moriarty can attest to the work they've put in. They've attended all the meetings. They got heavily involved with the debt policy model, with all the different scenarios. But anyway, that's the update, and I'll have to go out for an RFP for financial advisor. As I said, they were going to go into their 5th year, so we'll be looking at that as far as an RFP. Any questions on the controller's report or the financer? I'll answer at this point.
Ms. Moriarty.
I just wanted to ask a question about the RFP for Munis, and that's currently being written now.
I wrote it. It's now being structured in purchasing.
I was wondering if there are any additional services or modules or other innovation type ideas that will be able to come through in responses to that RFP, or is it a strict replacement of what we currently have?
It would be predominantly a replacement of what we have. As I stated at the last month's meeting, we no longer use the payroll module except for read-only. We have ADP. We don't use the tax assessor and the tax collector module. We have quality data systems. And one of the modules we're looking at 3 areas. Cash receipts, potentially down the road, we want to resurrect the concept of centralizing cash receipts. That's come up a number of years, and it never has really taken off, but we want to look at the cash receipts module. We want to look at the grants module. We're looking for areas of improvement in the grants accounting. And the third one has to do with the GASB pronouncement, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, where we have to do lease accounting. And we're looking at a module that will enable us to account for leases through there. So that's the 3 areas. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at the same general ledger, budget module, accounts payable modules. So it's predominantly a replacement of the existing
Right. It
systems.
sounds like that you considered new modules that might help improve tracking and productivity, but
Correct.
It would be good if there are other potential applications out there that might also help with productivity if the RFP is written in such a way to encourage a response to identify those.
One potential area, and I'm not prepared to get into that because I want to see what the Bloom-Shapiro report says. There's been criticisms of the Munis product in the area of capital project accounting. And as I said, I'd like to see the report before I commented on it. So that's also an area that we might look at as far as capital project tracking and see what's out there. And it'd also be an opportunity for the Board of Education people to see what's out there in that area too. But I'd like to see the Bloom-Shapiro report before I go further as far as commenting on that.
Mr. Drake, did you have a question? You had indicated
No.
before.
Ms. Moore already asked the question.
Okay. Ms. Hess?
Pete, would you, as part of this RFP, would you just also just ask generally, thank you, David, would you just ask generally about other modules that are available that others may be using? I think it would be helpful to say, what are other things that are out there that maybe we don't even know exist, so we don't even know to ask to put in the RFP? So maybe what else might you recommend that might be helpful? And a simple example might be like bank reconciliations. A lot of these general ledger systems now actually can do your bank reconciliation. So I think rather than being so specific about the existing modules and maybe a couple of others, but to ask more of an open-ended, what other modules are out there that might be interesting? And I think you might learn that there's other things out there that we could, that would be very helpful from an efficiency, effective, data integrity perspective.
Yep, agreed, and thank you. Yep.
Ms. Tarkington?
I agree to both yours and Deborah's comments. Is we'll simply ask for an inventory of everything that's out there, and just if we see something that we find interesting during the process, it's not only Tyler. There's going to be other firms that bid on it. We'd like to see the competition. Someone else might offer a module that they might not necessarily win the contract, but we might have an interest in getting a piece of what they offer that Munis might not offer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Mason.
My question, what Ms. Tarkington answered, what is Munis come from Tyler Technologies? Because if you go to about the 5th page on our webpage and look at the menu of modules they have, it's a worthwhile read. I was just verifying that. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, I think Mr. Weisbrod had it.
No, he was giving me the microphone again. He's being a gentleman. I just to kind of follow up, Will, and maybe this is too detailed, but I'll just ask anyway. When you put out a bid like this and you have all these different requests that you want to get information on, and if you find that one vendor can give you 3 out of 5, and then you've got 2 other vendors each give you one or the other, will that then break up into maybe potentially 3 projects? Do you have that ability to kind of pick and choose, or do you have to go with one vendor that can give you everything?
No, we basically, we're looking to replace everything we've got. The budget, general ledger, accounts payable. In addition, we have an interest in cash receipts and the other the modules, the leasing, accounting that I mentioned before. We currently have the modules broken up between Tyler Technologies or Munis, ADP, and Quality Data Services. Before a number of you got here, I think some of you remember how Ted Gortney always used to come before the BET and complain about Munis month after month after month. So right now, we currently have broken it up into 3 different companies. So my point I was trying to make was, if there's something that really we're interested in, like a construction module or something like that, and Munis doesn't offer it, we would look at trying to get that service from them. Our options are open at this point.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is your mic on?
I would just like to congratulate you on the success of the debt issuance and the good work, done with your financial organization that you work with. I would also like to compliment you on the section in this report that addresses the risk management, particularly the reimbursements, the details in the reimbursements on the 3 different projects that we've had underway in the Board of Education, and your follow-up and the information on how much insurance has been reimbursed to date and so forth. So I think that's very helpful, and I want to thank you and the staff that must have worked with you in order to put this together. So thank you, Pete.
On behalf of Megan, you're welcome, and a lot of the cooperation from the Board of Education across the field there. Everybody's been working together on this one. These 3.
Are there Any further questions for Mr. Menarski? I think we all echo the compliments of the dedication of your staff in completing the bond financings.
Thank
I
you.
know you do that annually since they come through really right over the holidays, first of the year. Thank you for your attention to that. Can I have a motion to accept the controller's report?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Tarkington. She was the loudest one in the room. Can I have a second, please? Seconded by Mr. Raymer. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report, which shows investing portfolio activity for the month of December 2018. Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? Hearing none, I note that the BET has received the report. Next item on the agenda is the BET Standing Committee reports, which tonight we don't have any, so we move on to the BET Liaison reports. Ms. Moriarty, please provide an update from the Education Liaisons.
Ms. Hess and I are the education liaisons, and we're on the project team for the Board of Ed Capital Processes Review. On January 14th, last Monday, I guess it was, we met with the consultant as well as the other members of the oversight group from the Board of Ed, as well as Mr. Geiger and Ms. Frame, who are working with us on that, to get an update report. The consultant presented the status of their work, including some preliminary observations. They expect to complete their work in early February, and the final report will include their findings and the recommendations. Once the final report is completed, it then becomes the responsibility of the full BET and the Board of Ed on what the next steps would be. And I believe our chair is planning to have this item as part of the February 19th BET meeting.
Yes, thank you. I've been working and talking with the Board of Education Chair, Peter Bernstein, and we've agreed to try to coordinate a joint session so that the consultants can present their report to both boards at the same time in the interest of both efficiency and cooperation. So right now we're targeting February 19th, which is the date of our regular February meeting, to have that report. There's been a lot of community interest in that as well, so we look forward to getting the results. Ms. Moriarty, thank you for that report. The next item is the BET Special Project Team reports. This evening, we have a brief report from the Nathaniel Witherell Strategic Planning Committee. Mr. Deuce, can you please provide that report?
Yes, thank you, Jill. It may not be that brief. As many of you know, last summer, the BET Nathaniel Witherell Strategic Planning Committee engaged a Health Dimensions Group to provide the committee with an operating and a strategic analysis of the Nathaniel Witherell. After about 4 months of work, HDG provided the committee with a still incomplete 100-plus page draft of its report last December for a preliminary review by the committee. We, and that is really Bill Drake, thank you, Bill, collected and returned comments to HDG in early January. Our hope at the time was that we would be in a position to have HDG share its findings with the full BET and with the board of the Nathaniel Witherell later in January. We had scheduled a presentation for January 23rd, but as you may have heard, we have postponed that. On January 10th, the committee had a webinar with HCG to review a 125-slide summary of their report. We had received that a few days earlier, and it included an analysis of the several strategic options that we'd asked them to review, and that included continuing as is, but with a reduced staff, sale or lease to a not-for-profit, and finally a sale or lease to a for-profit entity. To be fair to HCG, this last section was delayed, had been delayed in part because the analysis on the finance side that we'd asked another consultant, PFK O'Connor, to provide had been delayed. Specifically, we'd asked them to help us review the Nathaniel Witherell financials and to prepare a translation of their financials from the town's GASB to a not-for-profit's FASB. And I should add that Deborah was very helpful in working with them and moving the process along. Anyway, after the webinar on January 10th, we concluded that the presentation was not ready for the full BET. And among the open items, we've asked them to prepare an executive summary of its findings and recommendations. And that's not ready yet. We hope to have that presentation as soon as possible. We're not ready to schedule it yet. I will say that we do have a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the Gisborne room. We invite everyone here to attend. Not that we all can fit in that room, but you're welcome to try to get in. We will discuss the consultants' reports, and I'll add the usual hedge language. The reports remain in draft form and have been neither approved or accepted by the committee as yet. I think I'd like to ask Bill to add a couple other thoughts on the other consultant before we ask for questions.
The accountants, PKF, have done a great deal of work, as Andy said, with Deborah's help and everybody's help, Peter's help, Roland's help, to create financial statements for the withdrawal, and they've been created in draft form. They're nearly complete. Tom Marion of PKF sent an email in the last couple hours saying he expects to have the near final draft at the end of this week. So we're within days of having that part of the project completed.
Thank you, Bill and Andy, for Mr. Drake and Mr. Deuce for that update. I particularly want to thank all members of that committee who have been hard at work. It is a significant undertaking that will result in a lot of useful information for the town and for this board. So while the presentation to the BET has been deferred until a later date, it's not. It's really to fine-tune the presentation and to get a fuller understanding of the recommendations. And please stay tuned, because we will want each one of you to be fully informed about the results and have an opportunity to ask questions. So thank you for your efforts on that behalf and the report. We also have a report tonight from the New Lebanon Building Committee. Mr. Drake, can you provide an update on that as well?
The New Leb School is proceeding well. You remember, this project had a $37.2 million budget. We expect to be under budget. That's a great outcome. We've received $15.7 million already from the state, as Mr. Minarski put in his report. That was very helpful. The opening and first day for the students to be in this building is Tuesday, February 18th, which is the day after President's Day, which is the last day of the vacation, I think. And we're going to have a ceremony to open it on Saturday, because Tuesday's not a good day for parents and others to have an opening ceremony. So the opening ceremony is planned for Saturday, February 23rd. We're working to do something loud, lively, and beautiful. This is a great outcome. Every person in this room can be proud of what's going to be done. So please come on Saturday, February 23rd. That's really the opening and completion of the school. The project has also, of course, to tear down the old school, which will happen once we move into the new, and to build on the site of the old school parking lots and playgrounds. That's the west side of the new school, and to fix the playing field on the north side of the new school. So all of that remains to be done, and will be done over the summer, and as soon as possible for it to be done, it will be done. So this is a great outcome. Please come on February 23rd. It's headed in an excellent direction.
That's true. Mr. Minarski. Yes.
I think it's 10 to noon, but I'll send you all an email and be sure.
That's yes. That's terrific. That's terrific news. Thank you for including the BET in this update and in the invitation. And it is really an accomplishment community as well. So great news. Which brings us to the next item of our agenda, which is under old business. We have in the packet, we did a first read last month of a resolution recommending additional stipends for the Registrar of Voters. And we get to the vote and the second read this month. Is there a motion to put this on the table?
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, can you please give a report from the HR Committee?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this, as Madam Chairman just said, was up for a first read at last month's meeting. We have since gone back and added some detail to reflect the historical resolution the BET has passed specifically in 2014, 2016, and this is really for 2018. With that, I also want to be sure to thank Ms. Vasiliotis for her editing help in doing the research and adding those couple of years into the resolution, as well as adding the cost projection at the bottom. So she's done some stress testing there as to what the cost could be. I do have one change that I'd like to make, and I have discussed this with Ms. Vasiliotis, just for clarity purposes. And I promise to keep wordsmithing to a minimum. But in the resolved section at the very top, beginning in line 4, is to make 3 very minor changes. And again, the purpose is only to give clarity. In line 4, first to strike the word additionally, so that sentence would begin in the event. After the word registrars in that line, add the word each. So it would read both registrars each will receive, and change the word the to that, $1,500 stipend. So let me read it now as changed. In the event of a single party primary, both registrars each will receive that $1,500 stipend.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Is there a discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, with the clarification to the language to indicate exactly what we're voting on, this item's been moved by Ms. Vasiliotis, seconded by Mr. Turner. We have a resolution to correct these salaries for the Registrar of Voters. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one other item under the Human Resources Committee Old Business Report is to give my fellow members the schedule now of department presentations for additional headcount and reclassifications of jobs, as well as M&C. We will hear the first M&C presentation on January 30th. We will have an M&C vote on February 5th. Also on January 30th and February 5th, we will have department presentations for proposed new headcount, proposed changes in the table of organization, and reclassifications, with a vote on those positions on February 19th.
So the HR committee is meeting on January 30th, February 5th, and February 19th to take up the budget actions of changes in headcount and table of organization.
Correct. January 30th is the first M&C presentation. February 5th is the vote on the M&C recommendation or presentation. January 30th and February 5th will be the department presentations on any proposed changes to the table of organization, reclassifications, or additional headcount. And February 19th will be the vote on those positions. Absolutely. That's all from here, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Turner. We now move to new business. We have a couple of items of new business this evening. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of an acting treasurer, Natalia Yemetz. You have all received in front of you a draft resolution that speaks to the appointment of Natalia Yametz as acting treasurer. I will put this resolution on the table as I will move it, and I'll ask for a second, and then I will go into the background. So moved by Ms. Oberlander. Is there a second for the resolution? Seconded by Mr. Raymer. Okay. As you all know, our treasurer, Kathleen Murphy, has submitted her resignation effective January 31st, 2019. We have, this position has been posted, and a number of applicants have indicated an interest. And given the amount of time it takes to review, interview, and identify a successor treasurer, it has been recommended that we appoint an acting treasurer to perform the duties of treasurer from February 1st, 2019 until such time as a replacement is identified and appointed. We have in our finance department assistant treasurer Natalia Yametz. She goes by Natasha for those of you who know her, and she's agreed to perform all the duties of the town treasurer during this time period, and this resolution effectuates that appointment, where she will continue to perform the duties of assistant treasurer and perform the treasurer function, so that we are covered during the interview period. She will, as other employees, receive a small stipend to do this additional workload, and the BET will have participation in the interview process for the replacement treasurer. Bill Drake and David Weisbrod have agreed to participate in those interviews. And Peter, is there anything that, Mr. Winarski, anything you would like to add?
Just that we got 52 applicants. The process is the departments don't get to see them until they've been vetted by the Human Resources Department. They were promised as early as this week. What we'll do is, let's assume that they come down with 10 of them. I will get copies from the HR department and give to Mr. Drake and Weisbrod, and then we'll have to coordinate an interview team with interview questions as to how many people we want to interview. Usually we have a minimum of 3 or 4 people that we interview to go through the process. We expect this to be a lengthy process because of the number of applicants and the number of interviews that will be conducted. So she's just simply, it's a charter position. When I was out on medical leave, you had to have a backup to the controller. In a signing capacity, it's the same thing with the treasurer, or if the assessor was out on an extended period of time.
Right. Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions about this resolution? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item has carried 12-0-0. The second item of new business we have today is an OPEB investment policy statement amendment. Can I have a motion to put this on the floor? So I have a motion by Mr. Raymer and a second by Mr. Deuce. Mr. Weisbrod, can you please provide the report of the Investment Advisory Committee?
Yes, Madam Chair. So what we have here is essentially a housekeeping matter. We're adding the asset class of cash or near cash investments to include U.S. Treasuries, agencies, and FDI-insured certificates of deposit as eligible assets for the OPEB trust to invest in. That's the first change, and the second change is, well, that is the change, and it's reflected both on page 1 and on page 2 by including that category in the subclass and then wording to that effect in the second page.
And did the Investment Advisory Committee vote on this item?
We did, and it was a unanimous vote in favor.
Are there any questions regarding the change in the OPEB Trust Investment Policy Statement, which you've received in your packet? Okay. Hearing none, can I have a vote on approving this amendment? All in favor, please say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item has carried 12-0-0. Which brings us to the chair's report, which is very brief this month. Just a reminder that the First Selectman and the Board of Education will present their proposed budgets on Thursday evening, starting at 6 p.m. And the presentations will be followed by a Budget Committee public hearing on the budget. And then, shortly thereafter, the Budget Committee will start their hearing process. We'll spend a lot of time together over the next 2 months, as Ms. Mori already reminded us earlier today in caucus. And I want to thank you in advance for the time that you're going to spend and your dedication and commitment to the town and our constituents. And, of course, a thank you to the Finance Department staff for the time that they'll spend as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Ms. Moriarty?
I know that departments have been asking, but also committees of the RTM have been asking for this actual schedule by departments. It should be available by Thursday. We're just checking and confirming availability of certain individuals to be present, but it is almost complete. And it will be posted then, but one, you'll get it as an email, but we'll also post it in the budget page of the government website, if we get permission, I guess, to allow that page to be up there. But hopefully we will have not too many revisions as we go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty. Oh, and I have one other item for the chair's report. As referenced earlier in the item of new business, Kathleen Murphy will be retiring at the end of this month, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to thank her on behalf of this board for her service to the town. Ms. Murphy has spent 12 years overseeing the treasury function, including cash receipting, bank reconciliation, and cash management. She's been the trustee to the OPEB Trust Fund since January 2008. She worked to develop unique OPEB presentations for OPEB members at their monthly meetings and supplied up-to-date performance results and manager search information. She actively was engaged in the switch to the outside payroll vendor, ADP, and she plays a major role in payroll funding and reconciliation issues. She also developed the current certificate of deposit and treasury investment programs, which enhance the town's revenues. And during her tenure, she worked tirelessly with banking institutions to ensure the best and lowest fees for banking services. She provided valuable assistance annually to the auditors in completion of the CAFR, and she provides us with the monthly treasurer's report. So she'll be big shoes to fill in our interview process, and I want to thank her on behalf of the BET. Mr. Drake. Absolutely, it's a very good suggestion. I'll turn that into a thank you letter sometime in the next 9 days, I guess, aside from the BET. So, and that concludes my chair's report, which brings us to the last work item of the meeting, which is approval of the BET minutes. You've all received draft minutes from the December 17th, 2018 regular meeting of the BET. So we have a motion by Ms. Tarkenton, seconded by Mr. Mason. Are there any questions or comments to these minutes? Ms. Crumick?
Yes. Under the section toward the end of the minutes, let me just get the page, resolution concerning cash management. Having reviewed the controller's report, I'd like to propose changing the last sentence of that first bullet under resolution concerning cash management to read as follows. Based on 60-day notice from Alvarez and Marsal, the treasurer proposed adding a new broker-dealer firm, Financial Northeastern Securities, Inc., to replace Alvarez and Marsal, adding the Dreyfus Fund family as a mutual fund sponsor, adding Pershing as a custodian holding the CDs, and engaging Pershing to provide software as a source for the IDC rankings of financial institutions. The reason we're doing this is because Clearwater was incorrectly identified as the entity that would provide analytics, and in fact, it's going to be Pershing that is providing software data that can be accessed by our finance department.
Ms.
Can
Moriarty?
I ask for a clarification? When you read that sentence, you changed BNY Mellon to Pershing. Did you intend to do that?
Yes, because Pershing is owned by BNY Mellon, and upon consultation with Mr. Weisbrod, it appeared that that was a more accurate statement.
Ms. Cormick, can you read that one more time?
Happy to. Based on 60-day notice from Alvarez and Marcel, the treasurer proposed adding a new broker-dealer firm, Financial Northeastern Securities, Inc., to replace Alvarez and Marcel, adding the Dreyfus Fund family as a mutual fund sponsor, adding Pershing as custodian holding the CDs, and engaging Pershing to provide software as a source for the IDC rankings of financial institutions.
Any discussion on that proposed amendment to the minutes? All in favor of accepting that proposed addition, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That addition has carried 12-0-0. I have a vote to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes have been accepted.
Could I,
Ms. Cromick?
I'm sorry, could we do that as corrected as opposed to as amended?
Yes, as corrected. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Raymer, did you?
Just a question, and that is, did the resolution as we approve it read correctly, or do we need to go back and correct the resolution as well?
I
The
bel-
minutes purport to be confirming the event of our having approved the resolution. The resolution as we approved it at that time, did it read correctly?
That is a good point, Mr. Raymer. We will certainly go back and check that, and to the extent that we need to modify the resolution, it will be on the February agenda.
Water, whether the idea was that it would be Clearwater. It then turned out that Clearwater charges a fee and that the service could be provided by Pershing without a fee. So it's a good point that Mr. Raymer is making. It may very well have been that the discussion originally could pertain to Clearwater, but then with subsequent developments, that was unnecessary.
The point was actually brought to my attention by Mrs. Tarkington, who was too shy to speak up.
I find that hard to believe.
That's right. I'm tempted to call fake news on that, but I won't. Okay, Mr. Deuce. Yes.
Before I second that, can I make a suggestion that for the next meeting, we rotate the chairs, because somehow I didn't get the cushy chair. I got one of those chairs that are out in the audience. So I would appreciate it for the next meeting, and I
Okay.
second the adjournment.
Okay, all right. 6:31.
I sent the lady an email about those dates.